Hi friends, welcome to my channel. My name's Fiddle. Today I'll be showing you how to make a parabolic medical candlelit light that actually lights up. And as always, don't forget to check the link in the description. That would take you to the Scavenger Hunt, where you'll find the list of materials and a picture guide to help you through the building process. Okay, are you ready? Let's go. The main body of this light is made up of two markers, first being this round ball type one that is going to be an air balloon someday. But right now we just need the lid. These were originally sold on Amazon, but I have not been able to find them since. Before we can use this piece, we need to cut this bottom portion off in the center, just to where the crease is. That should allow enough room for the battery and for the cord to go up through the center. For the second marker, we need a Crazy Art fat marker. First, we want to take off the back end. We won't be needing it either, but I'm sure it would be useful for something. Next, pull out the marker tip, and that should release the ink core as well. Now we need to trim down this front end a bit. Leave about 1/8 of an inch left attached to the marker. I used my easy cutter, but a craft knife would work just as well. Once you've cut all the way through it, you should end up with a little small plastic piece, depending on where you cut. And if you look inside the piece that we cut off, there's also a ring in the center with posts holding it to the side. We need to cut away those posts, and we're going to use these two tiny pieces as our candles. And please be careful because this does make the plastic sharp. I actually ended up cutting myself when I finally got it. But anyways, this is what the bigger piece looks like when it came out. All we need to do is sand those ridges off and it'll make a perfect candle. But while you have your sandpaper out, go ahead and sand the marker pieces too. Next, we're going to make the magnifying glass. I used a resin mold and some clear resin for this, but if you have a small magnifying glass, that would be perfect. While those are curing, if you need to do any adjustments for your lights, this is a good time to do that. Mine is a strand of 12 lights, and I only needed 2 of them, so I cut the rest of it off. Then I opened up the battery pack, took the batteries out, and cut the pack in half because I only need 1 battery to operate these few lights. Once I had it cut down, I put the battery back in and tested it. Once I knew that it still worked, I closed it back up again with the screws. Okay, now we're ready to start assembling the bottom portion. I used E6000 super glue, baking soda, and resin to hold these two pieces together and the battery bank to the bottom of it. After adding glue, snake your light through the round marker lid, then through the marker. I did try to make it to where you could snap these in together by keeping the writing end a little bit longer, but there just wasn't enough room for the battery box underneath, so I had to keep trimming it down. Speaking of the box, that's the next part we're gluing in. I used both E6000 and super glue to hold it in place. Now that we've got most of the body done, we can start working on the reflector. Originally, I wanted to use this apple juice jug bottom, but it's so thick I was worried that it would make it top heavy. So instead, I'm using it as a stencil on a piece of produce packaging, the kind that they lay between apples in a bin, and it's much like a carton, except a different shape. I've used this before in projects. One of them I made a baby basket for a changing table, and you can find that tutorial somewhere on my YouTube. I really wanted to use something a lot smoother than this bumpy stuff, and I did try using baking pan aluminum and a ball tool, but my ball tool wasn't big enough, so it made the shape too small and it wouldn't have worked for it. Once you have your piece cut out, find the center and poke it with a pokey tool. Next, we're going to use some clear Elmer's glue and paint the inside because we're going to put leaf over top. Alternatives could be a metallic fingernail polish or a metallic paint if you don't want to use silver leaf. Once you have it all painted on, give it a minute or two to get tacky and then we can start adding the leaf. Mine is so packed in the container, I was pulling out gobs at once instead of individual sheets, and it made it even lumpier. But oh well, it still didn't turn out bad. Once it's completely covered, go over it again with clear glue. Next, make a hole towards the top of the marker, but make sure it's below the point where the other end of the marker goes into it. This is where we're going to be putting the fake adjustment wheel, and that's what we're making next. For this, you'll need a flathead jewelry pin. Then add on a small bead cap. Then put E6000 or another type of glue inside the bead cap. Then your gear or wheel on top of that. And finally, a small seed bead or round bead on top of that. And to make sure everything stayed together, I even went over top with super glue and glued my fingers together in the process. That's how you know you're crafting. But anyways, once I got my fingers apart, my lens didn't come out the greatest, so I had to sand it down and give it another coat. And once it's cured, we can move on to making the thing that holds it. For this, you'll need a pretty long piece of floral wire, your lens, and something that is strong and sturdy that's the same width around as your lens. For me, that was this paint bottle lid. It wasn't exact, but it was close enough. Leave about a half of an inch excess at one end and then wrap the wire around only once. Check to make sure your lens fits. And if it doesn't, you can use your pliers to close the ends back together. Once you have it fit snug and your ends are close together, wrap the short end around the post a few times. It kind of reminds me of one of those old-fashioned lollipops. Next, about an inch to a half an inch away from your knot, use your pliers and make a right angle. Now that we have the lens part finished, we can poke the holes straight through the lid about a quarter of an inch away from the top. Now that we have our holes made, we can slide the wire all the way through it until it just about touches our right angle. Once you've got it all the way through, grab a hold of it as close as you can to the marker lid with your pliers, and then start to curve the rest of it upwards in like a half circle or moon shape. Then about 3/4 of the way up, cut the rest of it off. Curve it in just a bit more so it lines up facing the magnifying glass. And to help hold the lens in and give it more detail, add a cone-shaped bead cap. Then inside the cone and along the wire, add some E6000. Then the reflector. And finally a tiny bead cap on top of that. Push it all to the end of the wire, then use super glue over top of it just to make sure everything stays in place. Now we can add on the adjustment wheel. Once you have it poked through, add a small bead on the inside and then put E6000 over top of it. I also added a little bit of super glue just to make sure it stay in place. Okay, now we're ready to put our two pieces together. Snake your lights through the marker lid and then set the lid inside the marker. Hold it all together with E6000, resin, super glue, whatever you prefer. Then add on your solid gear, but don't glue it down quite yet. We need to adjust our candles first. To do that, hold your candle in one hand, fold over the wire just at the light, then add your candle on. Repeat the same process for the other light. Then holding both of your candles at the very end to where the light just barely sticks up above the top, wrap all of your wires together and poke them down through the hole. Take the candles off and add E6000 down inside the marker lid, holding the wires and gear in place. Then put the candles back on the lights, then use E6000 at first to hold them in place. Then use super glue, and we're going to dust baking soda over top, and that's because baking soda and super glue has an automatic reaction where it instantly hardens, but it can also get hot and it can burn your skin, so please be careful while you're doing this. And a really neat thing about doing this is it starts to look like a buildup of wax, like the candles have started to melt, especially if you use a gel super glue. Keep building up the baking soda and super glue until you're happy with it. Once everything's had a chance to completely dry, you can move on to painting. I went with a base coat of black first. Then I painted the candles and wax strippings white. This is what my candles look like up close. And when that was all dry, I gave it a coat of a bronzish colored mica powder all over the black. And with that, it brings us to the end of our tutorial. I hope this gives you some ideas for your next project, or you join along in making this light with me. If you're new, welcome. If you haven't already, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. All next month is Ginger Appreciation Month, and we'll be starting off with a display skeleton. Thank you, Ginger, and I'll see you next time.